Welcome everybody to a quick introductory video where I hope to introduce the Visual Basic programming language and highlight a few of the most important features of Visual Basic and VB Studio. I'll do this by starting to develop a simple guessing game as a way of giving the language a bit of context. The game won't be anywhere near complete by the end of the video, but I hope you'll learn something, and please feel free to take this as your own beginning and perhaps continue to develop your own game from this tutorial. If you want to follow along, I have assumed that you have already downloaded Visual Studio for developing VB.NET programs from the Microsoft website. So the first thing we do after we run Visual Studio is create a new project. So here in the bottom right-hand corner, we click Create New Project. And then we'll be presented with templates. The template we want is the Windows Forms app .NET Framework template. So we select that, and then we click the Next button. And now we have to give it a name. So we type in our name, which will be Guessing Game, and then click Create, and then allow Visual Studio to do the work to create the blank project. Every new project from this template will start with a blank form called Form 1. We will be adding control elements to our form and then making them do what we want by adding code. First, in the bottom right corner, you'll see the Properties section, which is perhaps the most important aspect of the Visual Studio IDE. The Properties lets us control both what the user sees and also gives us access to the code behind the form doing all of the work. Before I add any controls to this blank form, I want to edit two properties that we will almost always want to edit: the name and the text. The name is needed by the code we will type in so that we can refer to it when required. And the text usually controls what the user sees for the form, and for each control we will later add. What I'm first going to do for this blank form is to set its most important property, the name, which will be the name that the programmer uses to refer to the form. In our case, we will call our form simply game, so I'll type that in and press enter. The second most important property is the text, which usually determines how the user sees something on the screen. I'll type in guessing game and press enter, and you'll see that the game form is now called guessing game. The first thing we will do is add our monster picture to the form. The monster will represent winning and losing in our guessing game. From the toolbox, drag and drop a picture box onto the form. Then we'll go to the properties and set its name to Picture Box Monster. Then go to the image property and click on the ellipsis to choose a picture. Any picture will do. I chose a random monster image I downloaded to my hard drive a long time ago. Once you have chosen your image, drag out the borders and position the image on the form. Now I want to demonstrate the code to make the image visible and invisible. This code will control the visible property of the picture. I'm going to run this code from the events triggered by clicking the two buttons. First, I'll drag and drop a button from the toolbox, then set both its name and its text properties. The text property determines how the user sees the button. The first button will be the Show button, and the second button will be the Hide button. Now, to add event code triggered by clicking each button, a shortcut to creating these new events is simply double-clicking the button on the form. This will switch you to the code that runs in the background and create a new empty event handler that handles Show button's click event, where we'll add a single line of code. In the code, I will refer to the monster picture by typing the name I gave it, Picture Box Monster. Then type a dot, and type the visible property. Then I will set the property to the special Visual Basic constant for true, which is VBTrue. Returning to the form, I'll then double-click the Hide button to create the new event handler for that button. And this time I will just copy the code I typed with the Show button, change the Visual Basic constant to VBFalse to turn off the visible property. Now, by default, I want the monster to not be visible. So I'll set the initial state of the visible property of PictureBox monster false. Now I'm ready to run the program and show the two example buttons show and hide the image of the monster. Now we want the user to be able to make guesses by clicking letters of the alphabet. So I'm going to start with a button to click to guess A. As usual, we will drag a new button from the toolbar and first set its name property to button guess A, then set its text property to A. To get some feedback on the buttons as they are clicked, I'm going to add a couple of labels to our form that will allow us to see messages as the code behind the form executes. To do this, I'll first drag and drop a label from the toolbox onto the form and set the name and text properties. For this particular label, the name property doesn't really matter. We just need the text to say the word message. The important label is this next one. Its name property will be label message text because we will need to refer to it by that name in the code. The text property I just want to initially be blank, but we will be setting the text in the event code from the A button in just a moment. Once again, to create the new event handler for clicking the A button, I will double click the A button. I'll write just one line of event code here by setting the text property of the label we just named label text message as follows. Now, when I run the project, clicking the A button shows the message I typed into the code. Moving on to the B guess button. Instead of dragging from the toolbox, I'm going to copy the A button and modify that. This is accomplished by first clicking on the A button, then typing Control-C, then Control-V on my keyboard to make a copy. The new button will be the same size as the A button, which is convenient, but I still have to set its name and text properties to make it the Guess B button. Once the button is properly set up on the form, again I want to add the event code, so I'll double click it. This time I also want to be a little bit clever with the event code to save myself lots of typing when I eventually need to do all of the letters of the alphabet. So my first option, one that I will not be going to keep, is just to copy the code from A, then change the text to B. Instead, I'm going to write a short custom subroutine to do a little bit of the repetitive work for me. To create a custom subroutine, I'm going to start just above the aguess event code and type sub, followed by the definition of my subroutine's call. In this case, my subroutine is called showGuess, and it takes one string argument that I will call text. When I press enter, the IDE will automatically add the end sub and leave me in the position to define the code of the new subroutine. I'll just copy the code from the A event handler and change the A in the string to instead use the text argument of the subroutine. That's all our subroutine does at the moment. Next, I'm going to comment out the old code in the A event handler by putting an apostrophe at the start. Then I'm going to call the new subroutine called showGuess. ShowGuess needs an argument, so you would expect that I would type an A here, but instead I'm going to take advantage of the first argument passed to the A event handler called sender. A sender in this case is the A button, and I know that this button has its text property already set to A, so I can just use the sender.text to pass A to the showGuess subroutine. This now means that I can simply copy the single line of code and paste it into the B event handler without any modification, because I know that the sender argument in the context of the B event handler is the B button, which already has the text property of B. Now, when we run the project again, you'll see that the message automatically changes to reflect the button that was clicked, instead of me manually typing the letter in the code. All this leads us to be able to quickly define each new guest key, and here I'll show how the guest C key is created, simply by copying an existing key in the form, modifying its name and text properties, and double-clicking to create the new event handler, and lastly pasting the same line of code. When we run the game again, the C guess automatically works just like the A and B keys. Now, to set up the solution to our guessing game, I'm going to take several steps, the first of which is to add the first of several labels that I will call letterboxes. The idea of each letterbox is that they either show a question mark or the correct letter if the user has guessed it. This first label is called label letterbox 1. One minor change here is that I will make the text appear a little larger by changing the default font size. Having created the first letterbox, I'll create 2 copies using Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V, then set their names to label letterbox 2 and 3 respectively. This allows our tiny example game to have 3-letter words as our solution, and it's obviously easy to extend that to as many letterboxes as you'd like. Now this next step is to set up the hidden solution, meaning the correct letter for each letterbox, into the tag property of each letterbox, because the tag property is not visible to the user. I'm going to do this as a custom subroutine again, because at some future point I want the solution to be flexible. Now, because the user cannot see the solution at the moment, but as a programmer I need to check that my new subroutine works correctly, I'm going to set up some temporary debug code that exposes the hidden tag value for each letterbox. Again, I double-click the letterbox to add my debugging code, and the code simply sets the message with whatever hidden value the tag property has been set to. Then I copy that code to new event handlers for the other 2 letters as well. When I run the game now, clicking each letterbox shows the hidden solution tags are currently blank. Now I'm ready to write my custom subroutine, which takes a string argument that I'm going to use in the future, just not now. And instead, I directly set the individual tag values for the letterboxes by referring to them by name. Here my solution is the letters C, A, and T. Now the custom subroutine needs to be executed as the game starts, and this is done by creating a new onload event for the form itself. To create this new event, simply double-click the guessing game form title bar. Now my new onload event must call the custom setSolution subroutine to set the tags at the very start. When we run the game, I can use my debug code to see that I've correctly coded the solution letters into the 3 letterboxes. The game needs to connect the guess letters to the letterboxes, revealing letters that are part of the solution. To do this, we will need more custom code. Firstly, I'll tidy up a bit by moving all of the custom code to the top of the class to keep it together. Next, I want to declare a list object to hold all of the letterboxes. This list will allow me to use a for loop to check the boxes one by one each time the user makes a guess. Now that I've declared the list, I need to add the boxes to it, which I will do in the onload subroutine. A list has the add method that allows new entries to be added, so I'll add all 3 of the letterboxes here. Now I'll modify the show guess subroutine to check the letterboxes each time a guess is made, and to reveal the hidden letters if a guess is correct. Before checking all the letterboxes, I'll declare a Boolean variable that starts as false to keep track of the search through the letterboxes. As a side issue, I prefer the more meaningful name guess for the argument, so I'll quickly rename it here. Now, because I need to check every box in the list, I will use a for loop. This loop declares an integer called index to track the search through the list. Because list indexes are, by definition, zero-based, the index variable must start at 0 and must finish at 1 less than the count of entries in the list. For each iteration of the for loop, we will check the tag of the current letterbox against our guess. And if there is an exact match with the guess, we will show the letter by setting the text property to our guess. And also set the found guess Boolean variable to true to mark any successful guesses. After the for loop has checked every letterbox, the game will react to the found guess Boolean variable by showing the message correct or wrong. Now we recall back at the start we added the monster picture to indicate to the user incorrect guesses. So we copy the code from the show and hide buttons into the show guess subroutine to match the success of each guess. Then we need to add the letter T so we can fully reveal the word cat. And lastly, we add a reset button to set the variables back to their starting values. This includes setting the text properties of the letterboxes back to question marks. Now we can see the reset button at work in the running game. Now I just want to quickly summarize what I've shown you. First, I used 3 controls from the toolbox: the picture box, the button, and the label. Then I added event handlers to some of the controls, as well as added some custom subroutines. And I showed you how to execute the custom code whenever the game starts by adding a new onload event handler. Lastly, I introduced the Visual Basic list object, and added controls to the list and iterated the list several times in the code with the for loop. Here, I just want to emphasize that it's very important to remember that the list iterator index used for the for loop is zero-based and also must terminate at 1 less than the count property, which is the number of items in the list. And that ends the tutorial. Obviously, the game is incomplete, but at least it introduces some of the basics of Visual Basic programming and can form the basis of your own game if that's what you want. Thank you all for your time and attention.